Welcome to the Times of Industry show. I'm speaking to a returning guest today, one of the most vocal silver bulls in the world, Duane, who appeared on our show in the past. He's predicted $900 silver, and he's backing his call with historical precedents and research. His very successful YouTube channel, The Grizz Truth Never Told, has over 152,000 subscribers, and he'll definitely share with us his current websites and where he'd want you to check out more of his work. It's always a pleasure speaking with Chris, and I appreciate his commentary. Obviously, with silver price in dollars hitting lows these past 3 weeks, and with the U.S. dollar hitting 52-week highs, it is a great time to see how Chris is reacting to this move and what his latest thoughts are on this subject. So, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm in
You traveling the
Barcelona.
world?
Yeah, I'm in Barcelona
Every
right
time I
now.
talk to you, you're like James Bond.
Well, what I've learned about the city in the past 2 days is that the wealth was unlocked once they decided to remove the walls from the city. Instead of having it fortified, they removed the walls. All of the diseases and the poverty that was trapped inside, it was, it got freed up. A lot of wealth came in. It became from a little town, basically 200 years ago, into this beautiful, beautiful city today. It's just an amazing city, and I'm really enjoying.
And they're one of the few cities that are trying to get cars out of the streets, and they've cordoned off certain sections where there's no car traffic, and it's allowed foot traffic to pick up, and it's supposed to be wonderful there. So one day I hope to visit.
Well, I came here from Amsterdam, which is a city that is not even built for cars. So it's so narrow. It's such a hassle that there are about 900,000
Bicycles.
yeah, and 900,000 inhabitants and about 800,000 bicycles. So it's amazing. It is a very quiet, bustling city. Um, so let's start with the most burning question: is this a bear market?
Oh yeah, and silver, absolutely. I mean, it hit its highs in May 1st, 2011, and it's been on a downward trajectory for now, what, 7 years? They had one little pop, I think, in 2015, but I think overall, I mean, silver's been, just decimated in dollar terms. I just did a video today talking about how the U.S. Mint is now rolling at, I think, 600,000 ounces per month in sales, down from when they were averaging 4.5 million ounces of silver sold per month in 2015, only what, 2, 3 years ago. So yeah, silver's in a really bad bear market, and these are the times that unfortunately investors are attuned to chasing hot markets with hot money, and whenever things go up, they tend to knock it out in time and stuff. But usually, I'm a believer that you buy things that are undervalued, not on people's radars. And silver it is the only asset class that's not in a bubble right now. It is the second most versatile commodity in the world next to oil, meaning that all these new technology and medicine and, even military uses all rely upon the unique properties of silver. Silver is a commodity that the United States Geological Survey on their own site says that the number one silver exporter in the world, Mexico, only has 5 years worth of silver left to mine. And it's a commodity that has unique properties of being actual money. Throughout all time in history, silver has been used in more countries throughout more time than any other form of money, including gold. And if you look at the history of silver, the banking powers that have emerged as the true power now, it's no longer kings and governments, it's the banking powers that rule. Because when it comes to, money, everybody's of the same religion. Started their ascent to power by, demonetizing silver in favor of gold. And then in 1913, they've established, central banks like the Federal Reserve. And they've slowly taken gold out of the money. All paper money used to be a receipt for the real wealth of gold and silver. They took away the gold and silver certificates. They've replaced it with Federal Reserve notes, which are debt instruments. And now we live in a world awash in not only, debt, but our actual money itself is debt. So when you actually have $10,000 worth of dollars in your account, those dollars only came into existence because the United States Treasury or some other entity created a debt that put that money into existence. And when I wrap my head around the idea that money is debt and debt is money, and that if all the debts were paid off in the world, there literally wouldn't be a dollars in any bank account, and we would owe interest still to the bankers, I was like, wow, this is a really messed up system. So now we have a global generational debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme that has run amok for over 100 years and is now at the highest level. It's no longer an institutional problem like we saw in 2008. We don't hear about Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and General Motors and AIG having institutional problems because of bad bets they made. We are now hearing about currency problems and sovereign nations going broke in the face of this global generational debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme. My contention is that this is going to be the single largest transfer of wealth from intangible, risky, debt-based assets that have all ballooned up, stocks, bonds, real estate, cryptos, whatever. Everything has been ballooned up because all this money is floating around the world and they can only put it into certain assets. And meanwhile, silver has been ignored for all this time. So yeah, it's in a bear market, but it's the only asset class that I'm going to be in, for the next 10 and 20 years until all this blows up.
Now, do you still hold on to the view that silver will be nominally priced at 900? Is this still a possibility in your view?
Yeah, so I came up with that number based off of the historical averages of 1/10 of an ounce of silver being a day's wage of hard human labor, and I, cited, Bible passages, where people worked out in the vineyards and got paid a denarius, which is 1/10 of an ounce of silver. I've cited the art of war, where 100,000 man Chinese army could be commanded for 1,000 ounces of silver, which is less than 1,000 ounces of silver per day, which is less than 1/10 of an ounce of silver. Industrial workers in the United States, earned 1/10 of an ounce of silver for their day's work. And, you look at what's going on today. I mean, for $8, $10, $12 an hour inside of an air conditioned McDonald's, people are earning, $8 or $10. So if you were to relate that $8 or $10 of minimum wage employee air conditioned work to 1/10 of an ounce of silver being the exact same thing, it came out to $960 an ounce. Once you add up those 10 days worth of hard human labor. But given the rise of what Bitcoin to $20,000, and Venezuela, I mean, the inflation rate's running over 1,000,000% and silver's up 5,000,000% in that time period. I'm never ever going to sell for dollars at that point. I'm going to hold on to my silver through the collapse of whatever the financial paradigm is into whatever the next financial paradigm is. So if I was a Venezuelan stacking silver, I wouldn't have said, 960 bolivars and I'm out of silver. No. If you got out of silver at 960 bolivars for silver, you've just been decimated because inflation is running at 1,000,000%, and now that same ounce of silver is now worth 5 million bolivars or whatever it is. You don't want to hold on to or denominate your wealth in dollar terms when there's a currency crisis, when there's a debt problem, because governments in history have shown that whenever there's a debt or currency problem or an economic problem, they run the printing presses and it destroys the value of the currency and the purchasing power of that. So I plan on holding my silver through whatever currency is until the next financial paradigm is established. And they're going to do something. But in the meantime, all the value that's been built up in paper assets, currencies, stocks, bonds, real estate are going to be utterly devastated. And the real purchasing power of silver in relationship to those assets is what I am working towards. I want to hold the silver through the currency crisis, watch the prices of real estate, income producing properties, technology companies, all of that stuff get crashed because there will be no financing, there'll be no consumerism. We don't know. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of geopolitical problems. And that's the time to buy. And I'll simply either trade, borrow, or sell my silver for those distressed assets and then move into income producing properties, stocks, technologies, or whatever. And that'll be it. After that, like, there will be no other things to worry about, but it'll be the single largest transfer of wealth from one side to the other. And right now, I think silver is the only place to be.
Now, that brings up my next question, which is always the most important question with regards to price predictions of precious metals that denominated in national fiat currencies. What kind of world will it be with this type of price? In other words, what are you predicting in the big picture? How do you believe this will occur? And the reason I say this is because obviously no one wants to live in a world where fiat currencies collapse entirely or collapse in a major way instantly. So we have seen a very gradual loss of purchasing power for the dollar over the years, but the United States stays the best economy on the planet right now. It has been for almost half a century, while every year there's an erosion about between 0.5 and 4.5, and it even reached about 18% inflation for the dollar. Still, here we are, right? So what we're talking about here is a major event. So what kind of world is this going to be when these kind of prices play out, if they play out? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to do is understand why this world currently exists. You said the United States has been like the best economy over all these years. The only reason why the United States was the best economy for all these years is because we were the last industrial base still left standing without their citizens devastated and traumatized by World War II. The world was economically devastated. All the productive assets of Europe, Asia, Africa was never an industrial power, and neither was South America. But of the major economic powers out there, the United States was the only one left standing and thriving after World War II. So our dollar spread all around the world as we instituted, or the basis for what our global empire is now between the military-industrial complex and the banking powers. And we've run through this gamut. Then during the 70s, we had women come into the workforce, which doubled the tax base, which doubled the consumerism, which doubled the needs of all this stuff. Then the 80s, we have the baby boomers now, working full time. They're investing in the stock market. They're buying real estate. The 90s, we had the tech bubble. The 2000s, we had the housing bubble. And we've slowly replaced the loss of purchasing power with more speculation. Back in the 70s, in 60s and 50s, the dollar, there was 90% silver in our coins, and we had tremendous purchasing power. The peak of the United States for the worker was in the 60s and 70s when we had tremendous purchasing power, and then it slowly eroded, and we've shifted into a gambling, investing, hoping that the Social Security and our 401ks are going to pay off one day. And now we're living off of children taking out, $1.5 trillion student debt loans that are, can never be washed away with bankruptcy. Preventing that generation from starting to form families and consuming and buying houses and all the typical stuff. We're slowly getting into more and more debt and more speculation as the real wealth has been dissipated. So, yeah, we look great, but 70% of our economy is consumerism. So what are we doing? We're taking out debts of money that we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people who don't care, and somehow that's a good thing. So I believe that this whole thing is running to an end. It's not just the United States. The whole world has gotten in on this debt-based global generational fiat Ponzi scheme, and it is going to end bad. How does this look? How does it play out? Well, right now we're seeing the United States and China trying to jockey for position of who's going to decide what the next financial paradigm is going to be. The United States is using military and the dollar right now to bully the world around, and China is doing the opposite. China is building businesses and stacking gold. So while the United States pressures other countries into their submission with military threats and and messing with their currencies like you're seeing in Turkey and what we've seen in the Middle East with the United States. China, during that same time period, has been expanding business ties with the whole world and stacking gold during that time period, even though they're a huge dollar holder. And the dichotomy between those two forces out there from a United States perspective, it looks like we're going to continue to run the table, but I'm not too sure. I think there's a lot of nations out there who are tired of being pushed around by the United States and, what we do. And they realize that the United States really doesn't care about the people there. So I think China has been very wise in establishing not military threats, but business negotiations and business dealings to empower and grow a different kind of world outside of the dollar. They've done a de-dollarization program with many of the trade. Most people don't realize that most of the bilateral trade between, say, China and Russia used to happen in dollars. Now it only happens in yuans and rubles. And I think that they're establishing a case where gold is going to be the international currency, and they've been stacking hard against this. The other thing that I'm very concerned about going forward is this next financial crisis will be the first financial crisis that the global elite will not need the human labor of man. Now, this is something I know it's probably a little far-fetched for a lot of people out there, but throughout all of history, empires and people who had any power would invade other nations, steal their resources, and take their people and use their labor either in slave labor or industrialization like we had, in the major cities, and brought all their labor to, create wealth from this blood, sweat, and tears of the average person out there. But with the rise of AI and robotics, they're predicting that within 10 years, I got little kids, within 10 years, half of the jobs that are out there right now will not exist because they'll be more cheaply done through robotics and AI, which leads me to the question of, when things get bad again, who's to say that they're going to make an effort to rebuild America again, when they can just simply take their technology and wealth and create their own little Jetsons worlds, and leave the rest of the world behind, much in the same way that they did with Detroit. They took their money and they took their wealth, and you see guys like Elon Musk and Bezos, who are talking about flying off to Mars or, whatever halcyon ideas that they have out there, but that nobody is going to come in and save this, save the system or reboot it. And how does humanity compete against robots? There's very few people out there who are going to be able to do, what you and I do of doing this. But for the majority of people out there, how do you replace that? The trucking industry in the United States is the largest employer. Is it out of the realm of possibility in 10 years that all those trucks are going to be replaced by AI self-driving robots? And then what do those guys do? Now then they have to go find other jobs. Well, maybe all those other jobs are replaced by workers. You see the McDonald's workers saying that they want $15 an hour. All that's going to do is spur more development into AI burger, flippers and, order takers. What does humanity look like? And that to me is the very scary fact. And then another reason why I am investing in silver, because two things. One, silver is going to protect us through the financial crisis. It is real tangible wealth, one that cannot be manipulated and inflated away. But two, the industrial demand of all these new amazing technologies are going to use silver. So it's kind of like a double prong insurance against probably the worst scenario I can picture for humanity.
Interesting. Now, I want to ask you, this is all very interesting, and obviously it all plays out in the paper market. So are you cautious? Are you nervous with all paper assets, with stocks, with bonds, with life insurance, etc.? Everything denominated in paper instead of real asset. Does this bother you? In other words, when you own shares of very safe companies that have been through everything, that have been around for 100, 150 years. Let's give an example, like a Johnson & Johnson. Do you think that this is a risky asset in a currency crisis? Just because Johnson & Johnson will be worth $0, does it mean that it will be worth zero in value?
No. So yeah, like when I say that I don't want, I mean, am I nervous about stocks and bonds? No, I don't own anything. Like I own physical silver. That's it. So even dollars in the bank. Like if I keep dollars in the bank, it's usually to pay my immediate bills, and then I go buy more silver. So no, I'm not worried about Johnson & Johnson going to zero. Do I think that they have zero economic value? Of course not. What I am concerned about is that when this goes bad, everybody's going to get decimated. The good with the bad. Obviously, I think the good will make it out, and those are the ones that I hope to buy. At the bottom. I would love to buy Johnson & Johnson when it's close to nothing, because that's a company that will never go away. That has intrinsic value. I'll be like Warren Buffett buying things of permanent value back then, but it still does not make, owning Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, these big kind of brand names that will never go away, doesn't mean that they're immune to the speculation and the fever bubble of, this global generational debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme. There's literally a bubble in every single asset class. Like I was hearing about the modern art market, how that's blown up. There's, huge investment in sneakers. I mean, just an insane amount of things. Besides the stock markets, besides cryptos, besides all these other things, everything is just floating around in this imaginary world of like, based off of this idea. This is what I find most amazing. The bubble asset prices that we're experiencing now rely upon the false notion that the United States or the world is going to maintain peace, which, historically that doesn't really happen all that often. That we're going to have low energy prices, which again doesn't always happen, that debt can continue to be expanded and interest rates rise, and the demographic winter that all nations are facing. It's not just the United States. Every single nation out there is seeing a demographic decline in the amount of people that are coming into the world. China's going to be Japan's at the forefront of it, with more people over 80 years old than I think they have under 20. Some ridiculous thing, like they're selling more adult diapers than baby diapers in Japan. That's horrible for a growing economy, because older people don't spend and they don't work. And they cost more to the society. China, with their one child policy, same problem that they're going to have in the next 10 years. The United States, is not going to be as bad as those two because of the amount of immigration we have. But geez, you see how we're treating our immigrants now. I'm not too sure that they're going to either want to continue to bear the burden of paying for this, or that, that they end up still staying here. So the things, the macro huge issues that are coming, and then throw in AI and robotics, taking up 50% of the jobs out there. Like, how does the economy function when we have rising interest rates, when we have exploding debt, when we have rising energy costs, when we have the world at, some sort of conflict, I'm sure, is going to come of this, because when commerce starts getting bad, politicians love blaming somebody else for it. And they gain internal power from that, and then throw in AI and robotics at the end of this. Like, yeah, I don't want to be invested in the stock market, certainly not at these bubble asset prices. But at some point, all the fires are going to burn out. Humanity's going to exhaust itself, much in the same way that they did at the end of the Great Depression or World War II, and some new order will be established. Whether I'll have to go learn Chinese to go do that, or the United States is going to somehow do something, I don't know. But all I know is that my sole goal is to make my wealth get through this next financial crisis, because whatever it's coming, it's going to be big and bad. And if you have your money tied into bank accounts, stock shares, bonds, anything, even personal businesses, my family business, they got devastated after 2008. I left May of 2008 saying, "Hey, good luck, guys," and 5 months later in September, they were rocked. Fortunately, they were more financially solvent than most of the other guys around there, but most of the guys, went out of business. And I think this next one's going to be far worse than what we saw in 2008.
I want to ask you, do you think that Trump's policies will get him reelected? And do you see any connection between who is in the White House and the price of silver?
No, well, yeah. So policy-wise, I don't see any difference between Trump or Obama. At the end of the day, the two biggest issues that I know run and control this world are never on the ballot. They're both parties agree on the same thing: more debt and more death. We are constantly at war with some nation out there, and we're constantly taking on more debt. It does not matter who's in office or what. More debt is created every year in excess of the debt and interest accrued the year before. Nobody's coming to go pay down the debt. Trump, I just did a video where he spent, like everybody, all my viewers, like Obama doubled the debt. He's the Antichrist. Trump just spent $1.3 trillion in new debt in 6 months, and nobody seems to care. So on the major issues that count, war and debt are the two things that both parties agree with, and I don't think, on the grand scheme of things, are matter who's in office. Will Trump get reelected? I didn't think this guy was going to get elected after, the grab him by the pussy thing came out. I was like, how does a politician survive that? And the guy's, banging porn stars while his wife's given, third wife is giving birth to his, thing. So I think it's amazing that he's in there. I don't know what that says about America. I don't think Hillary was any better. I thought it was the lesser of two evils, and I just don't vote anymore. I don't get involved in it. I strictly focus on the things that I can control, which is my wealth, my skills, my family, my friends, and I don't really bother myself with politics. Is Trump bad or good for silver? He's been horrible for silver. Obama was the best silver salesman and the best gun salesman. Trump is now the worst gun salesman and the worst silver salesman, because the guys that respond to this think that everything is okay because Trump's in office. And I think that Trump has been set up by the banking power to be the one that presides over the collapse, much in the same way Herbert Hoover was at the end of the Roaring Twenties. Herbert Hoover was a successful businessman who had great, talked about great public works projects like the Hoover Dam, and he started the Smoot-Hawley tariff war. He's another Republican guy starting a trade war, and that was a direct cause of the Great Depression. And what did we get out of that? 16 years of a socialist Democrat, Roosevelt, World War II, and the Great Depression. So if they're going to play out that same playbook again, Trump's the perfect guy for this. The Rothschild banking fortune helped bail Trump out in the 1990s out of his bankruptcy. Wilbur Ross was a direct agent of the Rothschilds, bailed Trump out, and his quote was, the reason why they bailed him out is because the Trump name is an asset. And now, guess what? Wilbur Ross is Trump's commerce secretary, and there's 6 Goldman Sachs guys on the board. What a perfect play to have Trump take the fall and have all the bankers all in the right spot to divvy up the wealth of the United States, much in the same way that they did with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Now, how do you view gold? I know you like silver, but how do you view gold?
Gold is overvalued by magnitudes to silver. So I had a chart that I've been using recently. In 1950, there was an estimated 10 billion ounces of silver above ground and only 1 billion ounces of gold. And that was very relatable to the mining of gold and silver. For every 1 ounce of gold, there's 10 ounces of silver that come out of the ground. Now it's 1 to 9. But it has collapsed from 1 to 16, 1 to 12, 1 to 10, 1 to 9, because silver is depleting at a greater rate than gold is. It is more found shallow mines. It's found with other materials, and silver is being literally mined out of existence. Flash forward from the 1950s, when there was 10 billion ounces of gold, silver above ground, and 1 billion ounces of gold. Now the ratio is that there's 6 billion ounces of gold, 6 times the amount of gold above ground, and only 1 billion ounces, an estimated 1 billion, I've heard up to 2 billion ounces of silver above ground, meaning that there's 6 to 3 times more gold above ground today than there is of silver. Yet gold and silver are trading at a 1 to 82 ratio, meaning 1 ounce of gold is worth 82 ounces of silver. If we were to just get silver to the natural mining ratio, silver should only be worth 1/10 of gold. 1 ounce of gold should be worth 10 ounces of silver. But in reality, and what would that make that? That would make silver right now, what, $120 an ounce? If we were just get to the natural ratio, and gold's not in any bull market by any means either. It's a suppressed price. Just talking ratios between the two of them. But if we were to be truthful with ourselves and realize that silver not only is a form of money, the most useful form of money, but also has the second most versatile commodity in the world next to oil with all the, high skilled, high value uses, that silver should be on a human level far more valuable than gold, and it's more rare than gold. I see no reason why gold can't get the par value with gold or worth more than gold in the future, especially considering the fact that, like I said before in another video, the United States Geological Survey predicted that Mexico, the world's largest exporter of silver, only has 5 years worth of silver left in the ground and estimated. So between the combination of silver becoming more rare, the price of silver being destroyed, which is going to destroy any future mining operation exploration, which has been going on for years. There's not any more large silver mines being found and mined in there, and coinciding with the collapse of global generational debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme. I mean, it's literally like the Death Star of focusing all your power onto one asset class. I mean, I don't see how it doesn't blow up in the future. So I like gold, but not at this gold to silver ratio.
How do you view cryptocurrencies?
Come on. I think they're a Ponzi scheme. I really do. I've been at this since 2011. I know me and you have talked about it before. Blockchain tokens, I don't think are ever going to go away. I'm not convinced that it's the best use of energy. But Bitcoin as itself, once you start attaching dollar values to these blockchain tokens, that's where it just becomes a Ponzi scheme. The underlying technology may have value, but it'll be essentially no different at the end of the day than, an email protocol or the internet protocol. In and of itself, it doesn't have value to be traded and commoditized like they have with cryptos. And the only reason why cryptos did what it did is because early adopters went about telling people that they could buy these things, and they build up the perceived value of cryptos, and everybody came in and started betting on it. As soon as they run out of greater fools and people realize that this is not what it was meant to be, it is not private, it is not decentralized, it is not anonymous, it's got a full of risk. And it's not even useful as a currency because of the massive, energy that it uses. I mean, I just heard that by February 2020, the amount of energy that crypto or Bitcoin's going to use would have to take up all the energy in the world based off of the, extrapolation of the process that it does to do this. That it costs more in energy to transfer one Bitcoin than it does to power a house. 8 houses for a week, or some amazing amount of electricity. And I'm convinced that at some point the real energy costs of producing and mining and keeping this Bitcoin and all these crypto ecosystem is going to exceed the rewards that they've been getting from the greater fool coming in, throwing money at these things, and that many of them will just cease to exist. I don't understand how Bitcoin, even at $6,000, once it gets below, I think China's cost of production with electricity, and they're burning a lot of coal to do this, the cheapest form of electricity, is $2,000 now. Once it gets below $2,000, I don't know who's going to keep the servers going to make crypto still exist. I just saw Ripple's been absolutely decimated, and Ethereum and all these other guys. So I think it's going to be a long, slow death to hodl to zero. That was the hashtag I came up with. And unfortunately, all that money that went to Bitcoin and cryptos has been siphoned away from silver demand. So another video I did was the United States Mint has had its worst year in a decade. The 6-month rolling average of silver sales is now 600,000, which is down, 80-90% from the 4.5 million that they were selling on average only 2 to 3 years ago. And during that exact same time period, the chief nemesis of silver back in 2011, when there was crash, JP Morgan buy silver, who had no silver vault, who was massively short paper silver. They opened up a silver vault, and they now have 144 million ounces of silver at their vault. So they've been stacking hard. This year alone, they've stacked 30 million ounces of silver, and the United States Mint, all the silver stackers out there only did 8 million ounces of silver. So while everybody in the silver community has been all jacked up and distracted with cryptos, JP Morgan has been doing the smart thing and stacking an undervalued vital asset, one in which I think that they're going to use the silver hoard, to either buy up the rest of Wall Street during the next financial crisis, or they're going to ride this sucker up to the moon when this all goes down.
Are you of the opinion that there is a modern way to create a currency system backed by precious metals, and how would it look like?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the free and open source blockchain tokens are a perfect solution for, a digital receipt, much in the same way we used to have silver certificates. They could have a digital receipt for real underlying wealth like silver and gold. But I'm still not even convinced that you need to have blockchain to do that. I mean, gold money right now, I mean, it doesn't take, 8 houses of energy or, thousands of dollars and all this time to transfer, a gold ounce from one person to another inside gold money's account. I personally wouldn't be involved in any of those schemes, because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And when we go through the next financial crisis, there's going to be a lot of counterparty risk. So I am of the opinion that prior to the financial collapse, whatever that happens, stack physical silver in your possession. When the other side comes, when you get to the other side, there'll be plenty of opportunities and ways of either borrowing against, monetizing, or selling silver into the next asset class that you can want to get into.
Do you believe that the price of silver is being manipulated, suppressed, or otherwise influenced on a grand scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think any look at history. I mean, since the crime of 1873, where they demonetized silver and forced these people who had loans with the banks to pay in gold, and the demonetization of silver in India, the 2 opium wars, which the British banking powers funded to loot China of their silver, because China was running a huge, guess what, surplus against the world, and refused to buy British finished goods to balance the trade. They brought in opium and got their population hooked on opium, and guess what? Took silver in return to balance the trade. And then, you look at the silver being taken out of our coins and our money. This process of now holding down the price of silver has been going on for, way over 100 years. And then throw in the Silver User Association that profits off of silver being cheap. You get Tiffany and Kodak and all these companies out there who love, make lots of money, dollar profits off of silver. They too are a part of this. They benefit off of having cheap silver. But to what end? To where does this end? I mean, at some point, silver is going to become so rare that the markets are going to take over. And, so you have the rarity of silver going down, the amount available above ground going down, the uses of it going up, and then throw in the monetary use, which is not even factored in silver's price right now. But what better asset to have when all the world's, banks and currencies are going through things? People are going to want to get silver just to be safe. And unfortunately, people aren't going to do it until there's a collapse. Then they're going to chase the price of silver up. Silver sales are down when it's 14, but wait until you see what they are when they're 50, 100, 300. People are going to be throwing money at it like crazy, and unfortunately be too late. I don't get why humanity can't realize we're on a path off a cliff and buy ahead of time. I feel like I have to beg people to do the smart thing now. And when silver becomes, $50, $100, $300, they're going to come to me, Chris, should I buy something? No, you should have bought it at 14.
What are your thoughts about the physical position of JP Morgan?
I think they didn't get to where they were by being stupid. I think they took over Bear Stearns' account, in 2008 when they went broke. They bought Bear Stearns for $2 a share. Bear Stearns was short silver when silver rose from, I think $8 up to $21, and at $21 on I forget what the day it was, St. Patrick's Day. I forget what year it was, but J.P. Morgan took over. Yeah, it was St. Patrick's Day of 2008. Prior to the financial collapse, J.P. Morgan took over Bear Stearns for $2 a share and took over their silver short position. They drove the price of silver down from $21 down to $8 a month before the financial collapse. So this is another reason why I think what we're seeing now is probably a prelude to a financial collapse coming this October. They smashed the price of silver down and prior to the financial collapse, and then it rose from $8 up to $51 or close to $50 in 2011. All during that time period, J.P. Morgan was short paper silver. And I'm sure it felt a lot of pain because there was, back then, there was a lot of people on the internet saying, hey, we can crash JP Morgan, buy silver. There was a whole movement, and it ran up to 50. And then May 1st, 2001, they came in and smacked it down like $8 overnight. And then it's continued this whole spread. But the exact same time that they did that, that's when JP Morgan opened up their vault. They didn't even have a vault prior to it hitting its high. So they smashed the price of silver down for these past 7 years and now have the largest vault. They have 71% of all the eligible silver on the COMEX, 145 million ounces of silver. They're doing this because I think they realize that the unsustainable nature of shorting and controlling the price of silver is going to end at some point, and that when the market is free of this manipulation, who's going to be in the best position to profit off of that? These guys aren't stupid. And unfortunately, everybody got sidetracked this past year chasing after cryptos, and JP Morgan stacked 4 times the amount of silver than the United States Mint made of silver eagles this year. The United States Mint made, 8 million ounces of silver? JP Morgan added 32 million ounces of silver to their vault just this year alone.
That's insane. I want to ask you, lastly, obviously people want to check out more of your work every time we have you on. Where can people find you? And I know you've changed recently some websites, so why don't you plug in the new ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best place to find me is at The Greatest Truth Never Told on YouTube, Truth Never Told. I mean, we got 1,500 videos up there, 150,000 subscribers, 35 million views, and I place something up there almost every day. And then if you're looking for the silver that I create, so instead of me complaining about the boring government silver, everybody goes, oh, I want to go buy silver. But then they rush off to the government mints, the Goldman Sachs guys who run the treasury, or the Queen of England. Like, I don't know why silver stackers want the Queen of England on their silver. I created my own designs. And so every week I come out with a new design every week. It comes with the certificate of authenticity. It's priced comparable, if not better, to all the government mints out there. And it's, uniquely mine. Like, I mean, I call out the debt and death paradigm. I have a lot of, new and interesting designs out there. We have over 500 strikes that we've done since 2012. We continue to plug away, and I've aligned my passion and my career and my logic all into the same thing. So I'm one of the few people in the world that have, kind of walked my talk, and God knows I do that. And then you can find those all over at goldenstatemint.com. They're the exclusive retailer and producer of all the Silver Shield products.
Could you spell that again? Make sure the people have got that.
Yeah, Golden State Mint. GOLDNSTATEMINT mint.com.
Perfect. Well, and we'll have it down in the description box below and your bio. That's perfect. Chris, hey, thank you very much. We'll definitely have you on to get an update, and we'll see what happens with gold and silver here. It's an amazing time, a very interesting time with the dollar, with treasuries paying so much better yields than other developed nations, which obviously is creating a rush into dollars, and it would be very interesting to see where we go from here.
It's not just a rush into dollars. It's a rush into perceived safety. This is an important fact that, maybe people don't understand. The United States dollar is, the world's reserve currency as it is standing now. And all these other emerging market currencies are suffering under the strongest, currency out there, the dollar, in a rising rate environment. The Federal Reserve has been consistently raising interest rates, which makes dollar assets worth more because they have, they pay essentially more interest, and they're considered safer. So all these countries with, high inflation are getting hammered, and as money is being sold in Argentina pesos and Turkish lira out, they're selling those, and that's making them worth less relative to the dollar. But I don't think it ends with the dollar. I think the United States stackers are looking at this going, oh, silver's going down. Well, it's going down because the dollar is going up, but that's not going to last forever because the dollar itself is a $21 trillion mess. I mean, we have huge deficits. We have an unsustainable economy built off of consumerism and stuff like that. We're no better than any of these other ones. We're just, when you measure shit currencies against other shit currencies, we look the prettiest shit. But it's not the end of this. I think the ramifications of emerging markets are going to lead to some sort of financial crisis. The rising interest rates are going to cause some sort of deficit crisis. Here we are. This is the first time I think we're going to pay over $500 billion a year just in interest on the federal level. Forget about all the state, local, corporate, personal, credit card, student loan debt that's going on out there. And a rising interest rate environment is very, very bad for this bubble economy to try to swallow. And I don't think this is going to end well, which is why silver.
Well, Chris, thank you very, very much. Obviously, very passionate about this, and I love your channel, and we'll definitely have you on again, man.